Your brain is almost always lying to you. This may sound negative, but it's actually not. This is one of the most powerful things that you can learn about yourself and your brain navigating this world and honestly understand other people, friends, family members, spouse, loved ones. And if you learn this about yourself, it's going to make you much more powerful in terms of introspecting, looking inside of yourself and controlling yourself. And once you know this secret, you're never going to unsee it in other people. It's crazy. You'll understand how their brain works much better than they even do. So let's get into it. So, to understand why our brain lies to us, let's do a super quick lesson on how the brain works. Humans evolved with multiple stages of the brain evolving. The human brain evolved in multiple stages. The oldest stage is the limbic system, the reptile brain, where many automatic functions happen in the beginning of our emotional system. Our midbrain or our mammalian brain evolved later, and it also controls and regulates a lot of our emotional brain. Notice I haven't talked about a rational or logical brain at all yet. That was the oldest part to evolve. Our prefrontal cortex or our neocortex. Neo as the newest part that evolved. Why does this matter? Well, when you experience anything in the world, you see it, you touch it, you taste it, it enters your body through your senses, and it goes up through the oldest part of your brain up to the newest part of your brain in that order. Many of us like to think we're logical or rational creatures. You certainly aren't. And if you push back and say I am, okay, cool. Let's just not argue that for right now, but I promise you not. We are emotional creatures first, and we are logical and rational creatures second. And as a little side tangent and a bonus gift to my fellow folks that think they are really rational and logical beings first, because I used to be, here's a tip for you. That is actually mostly a defense mechanism because you have some emotion problems, either socialized or traumatized. But back to what we were saying. When we experience anything, it goes up through the emotional brain first and then it hits the rational brain last. Our rational and logic brain are also in our conscious mind. What we experience, we see, we touch, we think, what we believe in, our favorite color, our third birthday, everything we can think of and we can remember. Our emotions happen to lie in our subconscious mind. So we're almost never really aware of them, especially if we don't train to be aware of them. So the way that it works is you experience something, it goes through your emotional brain. You have an emotional reaction in your body, and yours is going to be individual to you. All the things you've experienced in your life, your biases, your fears, your traumas, everything you think. That information that comes into your senses, like an argument, or a car tailing you, or a dog running at you, it enters your body, it goes through your emotional brain first, and your subconscious emotional brain has a reaction. And then after that, and only after that, does that information travel to your prefrontal cortex in your conscious mind. But since your conscious brain and your unconscious brain don't talk to each other very well, this conscious brain just has a ton of information flooded to it, and it has to make up a reason why. This is called confabulation. I also like to call it just making shit up. Another good analogy I like to explain this phenomena is the bad lawyer. Your prefrontal cortex, your conscious mind, is a bad lawyer or like a public defender that you get for free when you're being tried in a court case. Your emotional reaction happens first, and then your bad lawyer has to make sense of it. He doesn't have all the information, so the case that he presents to the court, he just makes shit up. Not saying he doesn't ever get it right. You can stumble upon the right answer. It may be obvious enough, but a lot of the times, this flood of emotions goes up to your prefrontal cortex, and we have to make meaning out of it. Our logical, rational brain, we are meaning-making creatures. We have to make sense of it, even if we don't have all the information, so we will just make shit up. An example, you could go to somebody's house party that you're only vaguely familiar with, and you show up, and you don't approach anybody, and you're like, nah, you know what? The vibe isn't good here. These people seem rude. I don't like the music. I'm just not feeling this place. That's what your logical brain makes up after you had an emotional reaction. And again, if you're not in tune with yourself and your emotions, you might not know the true reason, which in this example is you have a very deep social anxiety and you feel very uncomfortable and you feel afraid. So again, your bad lawyer makes up some surface level, easier excuse, makes easier meaning out of it, and you go on in obliviousness, not even noticing it. At least the root reason. One experiment that is really cool that shows that this is a biological fact. It was back in the 1950s or 60s, back when ethics was just a suggestion. They had a gentleman that had brain damage, and his specific brain damage allowed him to make no short-term memories. And they had him in a doctor's office, and they had a doctor with a white coat on, and what he had was a thumbtack taped on the inside of his hand that you couldn't see. And the doctor would come in, he would say hi to this guy, and he would go to shake his hand. And the guy with the memory problem would put his hand out, and the pin would prick his hand, and it would hurt. And he pulled away and went, "Man, what are you doing? Jeez." And he got frustrated. He got angry about it. It hurt. He didn't expect it. And the doctor said something and excused himself from the room. And they waited the allowed amount of time where his short-term memory basically reset. And then the same doctor would take the thumbtack off of his hand and go back and reintroduce himself but be brand new. And the doctor would put out his hand to shake. And the guy thought about it and then quickly pulled his hand back. And they asked him, "Oh, well, why didn't you shake my hand? Or why didn't you shake the doctor's hand?" And he just made up reasons. He couldn't remember that event, but the emotion stayed down in his limbic system. And he would say things like, "Oh, well, I'm just not a handshaker." Or, "Oh, there's dirty hands in the doctor's office." And he literally made stuff up. It is not the reason why he wasn't shaking the hand. So you and I know why he wasn't shaking his hand. And his emotion recalled and remembered not to shake that guy's hand. But the logical reasoning part of his mind just made something up to match the emotion that was in the man's limbic system. So being aware of this is huge. Why is that? Because you can start trying to see it in yourself. When you give reasons, especially when you're high on emotion, pay attention to them. They're probably wrong in surface level a lot of the time. Or it may be something obvious, but take a minute and ask why and see what's below that and what's below that. You will find a different answer. It's also really funny to see this in other people now, as we can always see problems in other people easier than we can see in ourselves. Next time a friend or a loved one is angry or has an emotional outburst and they say why, not saying you're psychic, but if you know the person well, you have a good idea of what's behind it, and they'll say some just basic made up stuff. It happens so often. That's their bad lawyer talking. So how do you get your brain to stop lying to you all the time? You have to be much more in touch with your emotions. You have to introspect. Meditation is a great way to do this. Sitting in silence and letting your emotions come up, seeing what they have to say. That will tell you a lot. As I said earlier, actually questioning your reasons are the first thought that comes to mind when you're explaining your reactions or how you feel, why you feel. There's a good chance that first answer is bullshit. So the main way is just being aware now that you know that your brain works like this, sitting in silence and really trying to inspect your feelings and the reasons why you do things. So at least you know about it and you can watch out for it now, and that is more than half of the battle. This is Matt from Mental Health Matters, signing out.